think is where they think that you went too far.
I don't care. I don't care. Oh. There is no too far. I don't play like that. So that's why you don't play with me.
Right.
That's why you don't play with me.
Throughout the entire Drake and Kendrick Lamar rap beef of 2024, one song has remained a fixture of discussion. And it didn't come from either artist.
You mentioned wedding ring like it's a bad thing. Your father walked away at 5, hell of a dad thing. Marriage is something to see.
Released in 2018, Pusha T's The Story of Adidon might prove to be one of the most impactful diss tracks ever put to tape. Not so much because it destroyed the career of its target, but because it forever changed what we define as a win within a rap beef. Pusha, forever the lyricist and wordsmith, made the fascinating choice on that track not to go after his competition with strictly bars and beats, but with hidden information and gossip, revealing that his opponent was hiding a child from the world in a move that handily won him the battle. In years since, with the rise of dirt digging as entertainment on social media platforms such as Twitter, Pusha's Adidon has completely reframed what we as fans see a great diss track to be. Expectations have now shifted from wanting hard-hitting bars and lyrical reads to wanting shocking reveals that can't be recovered from. And so, from the moment that Kendrick and Drake started going after one another with jabs about who's the greatest and hints towards taking the beef further, all anyone could talk about was the possibility of either artist releasing their own Story of Adidon. It also helps that the person Pusha was fighting in 2018, well, it was Drake. Fans clamored for a reputation destroyer, even overlooking some great songs in this battle because they knew it had the potential to escalate even further. The massive status of both artists making the prospect of scandalous information all the more appealing. And on May 3rd, we got our Story of Adidon. In fact, we got it twice. Both Kendrick and Drake releasing within minutes of one another nuclear-level diss songs with wild accusations and the potential to forever change how we view either artist. Drake's Family Matters questioned the true father of Kendrick's children and claimed he put hands on his longtime partner, Whitney Alford. Kendrick's Meet the Grams implicated Drake in some of the worst stuff you can imagine involving children and asserted that he's hiding another child, this time a young daughter. I'll admit that, in the moment, it was overwhelming, and I didn't know how to feel. Unlike Adidon, neither of these songs came with definitive proof of their claims, and I went to bed that night shell-shocked more than anything. I held out for support in either direction, but even as the dust settled, there was little to be found. Definitely not anything that wasn't available to the public beforehand. But the strange thing is, this was still a turning point in the beef, the moment where Kendrick Lamar definitively upstaged Drake and became the clear favorite, all without receipts or a discrediting of Drake's points. And the reason for that is the same as to why Kendrick's Euphoria topped Drake's push-ups, or 616 in LA beat out Tailor-Made Freestyle. Because Kendrick, across this whole beef, has been subtly crafting a narrative, one born out of the conceptual story seen across Lamar's entire career and brought to its natural peak on Meet the Grams.
Dear Adonis, I'm sorry that man is your father. Let me be honest.
In this ongoing series dissecting the deeper messaging in Kendrick Lamar's recent diss records, I've been very adamant that Kendrick's use of subtle storytelling and musical narrative through rap beef has been a key factor elevating him above Drake. And nowhere is that more apparent than on Meet the Grams. But before we dive into that track, it's worth exploring the song It Answers, Drake's Family Matters, because Drizzy's diss provides a perfect window into what Grams might have looked like and what effect it might have had without Lamar's more artful touch. Family Matters is a supremely bloated song. For every cutting Drake bar on the track, there's one that amounts to simple filler, and there's a notable lack of pace or structure here to make each of the song's 3 parts feel necessary. Additionally, the track fails to tell us all too much about Kendrick Lamar, its main target. When Drake isn't taking aim at the likes of Rick Ross or Metro Boomin, his shots at Kendrick are scattered at best. So much of forming a strong diss is stringing together information about an opponent to build an unflattering character portrait, something Drake just doesn't do. And most importantly, Family Matters lacks innovation. We're at a point now where rap beefs have become almost predictable. We've lived through so many and seen time and time again the common trajectory of a beef So for a conflict in rap to truly make its mark now, especially when it's between two industry titans, there has to be something more going on. A change to the beef formula that keeps it interesting and pushes boundaries. Now, Drake tried to do something innovative in this beef already, using AI to diss Kendrick Lamar on tailor-made freestyle, but that turned out to be a bit of a self-own. Many thought it was disrespectful, the Tupac estate made him take the track down for its use of Pac's voice, and Drake has been one of the most openly anti-AI artists in recent months, so the stunt just felt hollow. And while Drake tried to replicate one of the most innovative diss records on Family Matters, attempting to draw from the Pusha T playbook, again, his attempt fell flat. Where Pusha used his red button in the form of Drake's Hidden Child to complete a song that dissected Drake's psyche, Drake uses his own red button like he would any other diss, failing to do anything more than shallowly replicate Adidon. So these are the places where Drake failed. Disregarding the quality of his information and disses, a lack of curation, focus, and effort destroyed Family Matters before it even released. So what changes does Kendrick make to ensure Meet the Grams is something special? From a rigid description of its content, Meet the Grams doesn't differ all too much from Family Matters. It too contains shocking and unconfirmed accusations and goes incredibly personal on its disses, but the genius of the song and why it's superior lies in the details. Kendrick structures the track around 4 central verses. There's no chorus, no beat switches, just lyrics and a haunting instrumental courtesy of The Alchemist. In each of Kendrick's verses, he directly addresses a different member of the Graham lineage, slowly peeling back layers of Drake's identity and how it intertwines with his family. Kendrick uses Drake's son Adonis to explore Aubrey's racial insecurities, sexual addictions, and history of abandoning his children in verse 1. In verse 2, Kendrick writes to Drake's mother and father, blaming Dennis Graham for Drake's gambling addictions and manipulative tendencies, and pleading with Drake's mother Sandra to understand, as a woman, the predatory behaviors of Aubrey. In verse 3, Kendrick drops a major reveal of the track, that Drake is allegedly hiding another child. And while Kendrick certainly knows this is a wild reveal, he uses the hidden child to further comment on Drake's problems and how they contribute to a wider cycle of abandonment and neglect. With the final verse, Kendrick writes directly to Drake himself, bringing together all the personal failings he identified or exposed on the song and trying to find empathy with the tragic portrait of Aubrey that he's painted. So that's Meet the Grams, and even if Drake would have come with the same level of shocking information as Kendrick, there's something so captivating and effective about the very design of this song and the clear effort that was put into crafting it. It of course helps that Kendrick is an exceptional writer and laces this song with incredibly scathing and succinct disses, but what makes those bars work is how they all stack on top of one another and contribute toward a leading narrative across Meet the Grams, one that paints a vivid picture of Drake. Each person Lamar writes to provides an increasingly clear picture of who the real Aubrey Graham is, making this track more than just a sum of a few scathing disses and certainly not overly long. Despite a 6-minute runtime, it's impossible not to listen to this track in full once it has its hooks in you. Every bar leaves you on the edge of your seat because it's all necessary to the story here. And that's the type of engagement Family Matters, with its more simple diss strategy, just doesn't have. The conceptual edge of Kendrick framing each verse as a separate letter to Drake's family members, that certainly isn't something we've seen done before in the world of rap beef, making this track an incredibly innovative one that will likely set a new bar for effective diss records. The story of Adidon now looks like a rough draft of Meet the Grams, which is insane since that was the bar modern diss songs were measured against just weeks ago. Again, Family Matters as a more comfortable track can't compete. And I'd be happy to end the video here, asserting that Meet the Grams is great in a vacuum, which it certainly is, and that it basically does everything Family Matters didn't, which it certainly does. But to leave it there would be to undersell what this track is really doing. To fully understand this song and why it's an instantly iconic staple of rap beef history, we need to talk about how it slots into the ongoing story of Kendrick Lamar and how it builds on a foundation of artistry that ensured Drake would lose this lyrical battle before it even began. We need to talk about Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers.
I've been going through something.
In my last video on the topic of the Kendrick and Drake beef, I went in detail on the journey of Kendrick Lamar as told through his music and how Kendrick's euphoria built on that story. If you want more information about how Kendrick has progressed across his entire output, I would certainly encourage you to explore that video and come back here after. But in summary, Kendrick's story has been one of rising to the status of rap savior and then abandoning that status to focus on himself and internal growth. The album where the majority of that individual progression for Kendrick Lamar occurred was Mr. Morale, his 2022 album that dove headfirst into themes of trauma, cycles of pain, universal experience, and forgiveness. I discussed Mr. Morale briefly when I analyzed Kendrick's Euphoria, but an analysis of Meet the Grams demands a much more extensive look since it is, spoilers, a track that ties into that album on a much deeper level. Mr. Morale is a difficult record, dense in its themes, messages, and the means through which it delivers both. The record presents itself loosely as a performative version of therapy, every song standing in for a different session, and the album's narrative being determined by Kendrick's own journey of self-discovery through those sessions. The development of Lamar here is informed by the key teachings of Eckhart Tolle, a German self-help philosopher known for his ideology of living in the moment, accepting past failures, and limiting the egoistic part of the self. Tolle's concepts on morale blend with other spiritual teachings and the experiences of Kendrick to form a philosophy that can be read roughly as follows. 1. All people live through one another, personal experiences representing universal ones, and all persons influencing others through a web of interconnectivity. 2. To be aware of this connectivity is to be enlightened and to be in tune with the true self. 3. Experiencing suffering caused by others can lead us to develop pain bodies, manifestations of our trauma that can overtake us and cause us to harm others, in turn continuing cycles of suffering. 4. To overcome these cycles, we must become aware of how they perpetuate, how the people who initially harmed us were products of greater influences, and how we reflect those same people. And 5. In doing so, we can learn to forgive others, forgive ourselves, and allow for the space to breathe and grow and stumble in our own lives. That's far from a comprehensive look into the spiritual philosophy of Mr. Morale, but it provides enough of an explanation for us to understand the album. The story on Morale is linear, just like it is on any other Kendrick record, but spiritually, the progression is far from normal. Reflecting real experiences, Kendrick bounces across the album from moments of great suffering to instances of false confidence, to pained moments of regression, to actual bits of spiritual enlightenment, including the record's core worldview every step of the way, and showing the chaos of internal reflection. By the album's end, Kendrick asserts a profound love for himself and for others, acknowledging that he still has problems he must work through, but reaching a place of semi-stasis for himself, where he can take a step away from some of the more unhealthy aspects of his existence and grow in silence. Morale is one of the most vulnerable albums ever created, oftentimes an uncomfortable listen, but the ideas within it are incredibly essential to understanding the modern identity of Kendrick Lamar, especially as it pertains to his beef with Drake. Mr. Morale was a record that didn't exactly hit with everyone. Maybe it was too dense or too dark, but for whatever reason, the album was written off by many. That's fairly sad considering that the record was intended to spread such a universal message of healing, but I'd argue that the failure of Morale to connect with mass audiences is something Kendrick is incredibly aware of, and I'd say this entire beef is a kind of revised means of presenting the messages of Morale to the public. Meet the Grams giving us Kendrick's ultimate thesis of those lessons. All the artistic techniques I've discussed so far that give this track an edge over any of Drake's, well, each of them serve a purpose in advancing the narrative of Mr. Morale. The very structure of the track, Kendrick commenting on Drake through letters addressed to his family, simultaneously shows how Drake's own life is reflected in the lives of others, and how the influences of people around him shape Drake into who he is today. Universal connectivity and action. Referencing Drake's parents, Kendrick gives us a loose starting point for some of the more negative patterns Drake embodies. Patterns Kendrick shows Aubrey is instilling into his children. And so we come back to the concept of the pain body, trauma causing more trauma in cycles of suffering that Kendrick defined as generational curses on Mr. Morale. As he did on Euphoria, Kendrick devotes certain lines on Meet the Grams to drawing parallels between Drake and himself, making clear that no matter how twisted Drake has been or how much Kendrick might personally despise him, there must be room for redemption and growth. Themes of forgiveness and reflection, as seen on Mr. Morale, once again appear. But while Kendrick relates to Drake in some ways, this certainly doesn't mean Kendrick minimizes Drake's alleged wrongs. Just as often as he ties himself to Drake on Meet the Grams, Kendrick links his experiences with those of Drake's children, drawing on his own victimhood to better understand how harmful Aubrey's actions have been. Again, we're dealing with universal experiences and generational curses. And the hatred Kendrick embodies across this whole song? Well, that's just a symptom of the still flawed individual Lamar told us he was at the end of Mr. Morale. He's regressing in some ways here, driving home even further Morale's central concepts. This track is Mr. Morale in a distilled package, a TLDR for that album, if you will. But to say Kendrick is just restating the themes of Morale on this track would, again, be underselling his artistry. More than just a recycling of the philosophy on Morale, Kendrick's choice to apply the messages of that record directly onto Drake show their application in the real world. Morale was an album advocating that everyone process their faults and end their generational curses through coming to terms with how certain influences caused them to harm others. But there was only so much Kendrick could do on that album as an individual. While Kendrick tried to use his features on that album to show a more universal experience, Kendrick couldn't really force anyone to open up to the extent that he did. But now, Kendrick has exposed cycles of suffering in another, albeit in a way that reflects somewhat negatively on himself. But regardless, Kendrick has proven a lot of the groundwork laid on Mr. Morale to be undeniably true. Kendrick is all at once here going after Drake, delivering a diss that functions perfectly on its own, following up Mr. Morale, and showing his personal philosophy to be true in a real-world context. Next rap beef that comes along, I'm not looking for a story of Adidon, I am looking for more of this. Meet the Grams is not a fun song. It's not all too replayable, and I wouldn't say Kendrick's lines here will be the most iconic from this battle. Not Like Us, Kendrick's anthemic follow-up to this very track, fits all that criteria and will certainly be the defining record from this era. But on a creative and artistic level, Meet the Grams has become my staple song from the recent flood of diss records. It's like sitting in on Drake's incredibly revealing session with the world's meanest therapist, and it represents the type of inventive track that only Kendrick Lamar could pull off, deftly balancing multiple angles and ideas in a fulfilling manner. Every technique here, every word, is carefully placed with the analytical touch seen on countless other Kendrick songs, showing that Lamar doesn't have to compromise his artistry to dismantle an opponent. On May 3rd, I showed up for the disrespect and shocking revelations, but I'll be coming back to this one for the almost poetic dissections and the rich themes on display, for the ties to Mr. Morale and the advancements of that album's story, and for how Kendrick abandoned a more traditional diss strategy here in favor of a personal introduction to Drake and all the people who helped shape him into the incredibly flawed person we see today. How Kendrick Lamar led us, or more forced us, to meet the Grams.
Dear Aubrey, I know you probably thinking I wanted to crash your party, but truthfully I don't have a hating bone in my body.
What's up, guys? I am filming this on my iPhone, which should probably be a sign that I'm very kind of overwhelmed right now. Didn't really have time to film a proper outro, but regardless, I'm here at the end just to say thank you all for watching. I worked really hard on this one. I had to do a lot of work in a very short amount of time, which I feel like I'm always having to do. But I'm very proud with how this video turned out. I think it's, a great one, and I really love getting to talk about Kendrick. Although I am probably going to pivot to some non-music stuff for a bit, at least non-Kendrick stuff, just to give myself like a bit of a break. I've been doing a lot of Kendrick writing and research and editing and stuff like that for a while now, so I need more variety. Again, hope y'all enjoyed the video. Like I said, very proud of it. I do just want to come on here at the end, as I always do, to give a massive thank you to my patrons. Y'all are literally what keeps this channel alive. And I want to give a very special shout out to my patrons in these shout out tiers, which, let me just say, we've been losing some patrons recently. If you want to support the channel, Patreon is the absolute best place to do that. Keeps my bills paid, keeps these videos coming. I have a lot of really cool ideas that I want to make this summer. And I give updates about them over on Patreon. I'm also going to start trying to upload a week in advance, like I often promise I do. I've just been very overwhelmed lately, so uploading a week ahead of schedule has been a little bit hard, but I'm getting back on schedule. I hope to keep that as a thing. Yeah, so my patrons. Anyway, special thanks to Anya May, Onyx, Sophie Villarot, Adrian_R31, Alex Mirabal, and Grace. And with that being said, as always, I have been Ellie, you have been wonderful, and until next time, bye!